Affair of the Free Child is a weekly podcast that centers
diverse narratives, insightful commentary,
learning with our children and deschooling ourselves,
owning our multiple identities and treating children with dignity,
creating community and sharing conversation from often silenced spaces,
breathing life into liberation practices proactively and on purpose.
It's about parenting. It's about self-directed education, loving. It's about learning, liberatory practices,
defining love for ourselves and giving our love to as much of the world as it can possibly contain.
Let's find each other. Let's support each other. All of these stories are important and should be shared. The show notes page for this episode is akilasrichards.com/Moya, Moya. All right. So this episode, y'all, is full of intergenerational mojo. We're talking about how becoming a parent and wanting to raise free people causes you to mirror up and face your own self. My guest today is Moya Kelly, a 25-year-old mama and wife. And we're talking about deciding to do parenting differently and also mothering ourselves and healing from oppressive relationships that leave us feeling like we're in a free fall. So essentially, Moya and I are talking about self-mothering for healing. And I know y'all have probably seen those prompts online or in journals or wherever about connecting with your 20-something selves, right? I'm almost 40, so those things have come up a lot for me already, the 20-something, reaching back to that self. You know, you see things about writing a letter to your younger self and all of that. And a part of why I do this sort of work is so that some of us won't have to recover from our younger selves. I do this sort of work out loud for those types of reasons, of course, because I want us to trust children and I want us to raise free people. But there are also some of us who are grown who are either not parents yet or will never be parents, have no desire to be parents. But we also need this sort of work. We also need to know how to raise ourselves and free ourselves. I want us to start recognizing our power earlier on in life. So from childhood, ideally, but even in our 20s, if it comes down to that, and so that we can own our power and our right to define ourselves and to own that self. And Moya is doing that work right now. She's deschooling herself and also just learning a lot about herself and life through her relationship, her ever-evolving relationship with her son. So we're talking about things like religion and spirituality, facing the ways that we were raised, appreciating that our parents did whatever made sense to them, but realizing the ways that it doesn't make sense for us. So we also talk about the guilt around that and how we can feel lost. And when we start shedding that stuff, how it can start to feel like a free fall, but how that free fall is actually freedom. Yeah. So Moya is committed to raising her son, Jordan, as a free person. Her son is 2. And Moya and Jordan and Brian, they're special to me for many reasons, including the fact that Moya is my cousin. Her father is my mom's older brother, and he's one of the men who made my childhood so wonderful because he loved on me like a father, and he's one of the people who really helped to raise a confident little girl. He was part of the village that helped my mother to raise her babies, and now I get to be part of the village that supports Moya and her husband in raising their son. This one's in 2 parts. Part 1 is really mostly about self-mothering, and then part 2 goes into the focus on education and what learning can look like for a younger child, because remember, Jordan's 2, including the ways that daycare or preschool can hinder learning.
I'm 25. My son is 2 years old, been married for 3 years. So I am right in the middle of the self-exploration, and I don't want to say I was feeling lost because, you know, I'm still learning, but that's where I am right now, just in the middle.
When I invited Moya on, one of the reasonings around it is that so many of us know that becoming a mother or becoming a father, you learn so much about yourself as you go through that process in preparation for becoming a parent, and then just discovering your child and discovering the way that your relationship changes and just kind of facing your shit, in a way that doesn't happen before that. Yeah. So can you tell us what's happening for you? Obviously nothing specific. We ain't trying to get all in the business. But not necessarily the incidents, but sort of the resulting feelings that are coming up for you now, as you say, you're kind of in the middle of the self-exploration.
Well, for starters, religion. I'm still exploring that. Right now, I'm focused on that and motherhood because I was raised in a church environment. I didn't have a choice, had to go to church every Sunday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. And I have like this programmed brain to just, be that, but I'm not. So when I realized that I'm not, it was hard. And I even felt guilty.
Yeah.
So
and that term, the word guilty, so many of us connect with that word because we absolutely have had that experience, even though we know we're not that. Like you said it. I know that I'm not. It's not like you're saying, I think I might not be. You said, I know that I'm not, but we still carry the guilt. So what made you realize that you're not?
I mean, it just didn't make sense to me. I tried to make sense of it. It didn't make sense to me. It didn't feel right. It felt like I was trying to do something or telling myself to do something. And I didn't even know why I was doing it. People would ask me why. I'm like, I don't know, because I'm supposed to. But I'm not following myself. I'm not doing what I want to do, which leaves you in that completely lost and guilty and just that feeling.
Yeah, exactly. Because we don't really have any practice managing ourselves. We don't have any, it feels like a free fall, right? But really it's not a free fall. It's freedom. It means that you get to choose, but because we are socialized and groomed to stay in this box, then we become adults and then we don't have any practice really owning ourselves and our thoughts. And so this is why parenting is such an opportunity for us to not perpetuate that, because it's really easy to try to make our children fit into what we think they should be,
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so that's that correlation, because all of us are former children. And so there's a lot of parenting brings you to the point where you do a lot of sort of mothering of yourself and sort of deschooling your mind to say, okay, no, I've tried so many times to make sense of this. And the reality is that it doesn't make sense for me. It's not that it might not make sense for somebody. It just doesn't make sense for me. Now, what do I do to not try to make that some sort of act of rebellion? Because I'm not rebelling against anything. I'm actually embracing me, which is totally fine. So it's those sort of paradigm shifts that happen. But then with parenting, and you could tell us a little bit about where you are with King Jordan and what you're learning about like just yourself and your patterns and those sort of things through mothering him. But also as you're stepping more and more into yourself in your mid-20s, it's such a pivotal stage in a journey. I remember I had a quarter life crisis when I turned 25. Like I felt like, I think I was 23. Like I moved back to Florida. I was depressed as shit. I was like, I'm nowhere where I thought I would be in life. What the hell was the point of me like working this hard to be like right here and like going into a relationship and all of these very, like significant life shifts that teach you a lot about yourself. Yeah. And you survive them and all of this stuff. And then you realize how similar you are to your mom in some ways and then how different you are from your mom. And you manage that. Like, did you deal with any of that? Did you realize any connectedness between or distance from your mom?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, she couldn't teach me something she didn't know. I mean, so I did feel a little connection of how I was doing what she thought was best for me, but it just wasn't, I don't know how to say it nicely.
No,
but
there's
it was
no
just
need
not.
for it nicely. That's the truth. The truth is the nicest way. Oh boy, I hear you. Yeah. And so how does that play out now in your relationship with Jordan? Do you ever check yourself? Do you ever find yourself being like, yo, or do you ever find yourself being very happy about how you let him be?
Oh gosh, yes. Oh please, I check myself all the time. What's worse, Jordan checks me. He'll ask these questions, who's God? Why do we have to do, you're two. You know, he checks me all the time, and he makes me sit down and realize, man, this really, really doesn't make sense. And I'm dropping to him, and he wants to know because he wants to make sense of it.
Yep.
And I couldn't even answer him. I'm like, yeah, I have to stop. This is just, I can't make him grow up to just be as lost as I am. I'm trying to, stop that. It has to be stopped.
And you are. This is how, and I think this is how we do it. And that's why I really want so much to have these types of conversations, and not just talking about giving children their freedom and trusting them, like observing and trusting them, because we as children, and I don't know, you tell me your thoughts on this, but my sentiments, and I know a lot of the women that I talk to, particularly mothers, and a lot of the men, because Chris and I have this conversation all the time too, is that as children, we didn't feel trustworthy.
Right.
Some adult, especially a parent, was always telling us either how we were fucking up, or what we needed to do to make sure we didn't fuck up, or why we better not fuck up like the other person who fucked up.
Yes. And no one needs that kind of pressure.
So then you become a dad, or you become a mom, or you become a grandparent even, because my mom talks about it too, to some extent. And then you realize how that way influences you negatively. It causes you to judge yourself instead of being compassionate. It's like you would give more compassion to somebody else than you would yourself.
Absolutely. That's guilty.
But parenting kind of allows us to peel back the layers, because as you said, Jordan checks you. It's like, why do we need to do this? And then it allows you, it gives you permission in a sense to be with it and say, you know what? That's it. No, I'm gonna get to see that. And that's why I call my daughters my life guides. I've been saying that since I met Marley, since we looked each other in the eye. She was 5 when she started writing me letters about needing me to back up and give her space because I was so ruly, and she was really uncomfortable with it. I still have the letters.
So sweet.
Oh my God, at 5, and in my brain I'm like, okay, LOL, huh?
Yeah, right. But that is good. That she did the right thing,
Exactly.
Letting you know, she's sharing that with you instead of being in her room like, Mom, leave me alone.
Exactly. And
at least she had that open space to talk to you.
Instead of channeling that energy elsewhere, right? Guilty again of doing that, of like, instead of having the conversation, then I just lash out in some other way. Being in that environment with her and seeing even the relationship with her and Chris, and then Sage and Chris and Sage and me, you really get to see the rewards of giving everybody the freedom to be themselves, like to not try to enforce this idea of who they should be, whether it's my man or my daughters, what the benefits are of that, because then you trust each other and you can have really honest conversation. And then I also get to learn who they are and decide, what works for me, what doesn't, and also how I can support them and how they can support me.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Being a parent does open your eyes to things that you just didn't notice before. They are definitely life guides. He's definitely a life guide for me.
Yeah. And I love when you guys post these Instagram videos, with him just having those moments. I think it's so beautiful to be able to share those things too, because I think those are the sort of things that remind us that we can trust children, that we don't have to simulate an environment for them. We don't have to put them inside a system or a curriculum of any sort, and whether that's in school or even at home. If you observe them, you will see very much when they're ready for certain things. They'll tell you oftentimes. It's just being able to do that and to show other parents that, this is an option, that you don't have to assume the worst. You don't have to assume that that if you don't enforce something that your child is gonna not learn, or they're gonna do something bad or wrong.
Right. Yeah. That's absolutely right. I don't want him to feel like he should be a certain way. I actually want to see what he wants to do, where he wants to go, when he wants to learn something. He'll just bust out in the ABCs, and I'll grab the book and do ABCs at that moment. I don't want to have to like, okay, we're doing this every night at 9:00. It did not work for him.
Yeah.
You have to, follow him, and he learned best that way.
Exactly.
Just me following him, kind of like, okay, mommy, I'm ready to do
Yep.
this, or,
Absolutely. And then you are also building your own trust in yourself, because this isn't something you read in a book or something someone told you. This is your intuition showing you, because you're connected to your child, and you can feel when you're being coercive, and you can feel when you're being supportive and when you're being a facilitator. Because even in those moments where he'll bust out the ABC, sometimes it's like, you know what, maybe I don't get the book. Maybe I just bust out with the ABC too and see where it goes. And, because then even like with language, like Sage helps me a lot with learning languages, because she's really into learning different languages and learning about like how the origin of a word and the languages behind it. So I love that. We share that. My degree is in speech communications. I thought I was going to be a speech pathologist because I love language and sound. And so we have that commonality. And when she's going to learn a language, for me, I'm like, okay, here's the vocabulary word, here are the ABCs. And she's like, no, let's just go watch. What we do is we get on Netflix and we put, like right now we're learning German. So we'll put the German subtitles. No, she'll put it in German. So the audio is in German, and then we put the English subtitles. And that's how we watch the movie. So you see the difference between my idea of this very like, okay, start with the alphabet, and hers of like, nah, let's just listen to it and read it. And, so it's like.
And that probably works better for her as opposed to you would getting the book and doing it that way.
And that's the thing, Moya. Actually, the book way didn't work better for me.
Mm-hmm.
That way is working better for me, but I would have never known that.
You didn't even think to, okay.
Right.
But they will show you what works for them. You just have to listen and pay attention. And,
absolutely.
Don't think you know all the answers, because I'm just.
Because that's the relationship we were in with the adults around us, right? The adults knew, and our job was to just do what they say. If we could just manage to do what they fucking say.
Yes, then we'll be fine.
Right.
But then several times I've done what you said to do.
Yes.
I don't feel comfortable.
and them don't know the answer either every time.
Right.
That's the thing. And as adults, we know that. We know now. And our parents will tell us because we're figuring shit out. And so it's to give our kids the space to do that too. And the reason I brought up the example with Sage and Netflix too is just bringing in technology. A lot of us, and I'm not sure, I'm really curious to know your perspective as a 25-year-old, as opposed to me, I'm 39. Your relationship with technology is different than mine, right? Like I didn't grow up in a household where a computer was like the norm. Right? That you had a computer at school, whereas now, my computer is like my third fucking child. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's Marley, there's Sage, and there's Zen, my beautiful laptop baby. So it's like, and then for the girls, they have phones and they have iPads and they have a laptop. So their relationship with technology is a very connected one. But then you have a lot of us who say, no, you can't be on the screen all the time. But look how she introduced Netflix as a learning tool in this space. And because of it, I realize that I can learn a better way.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Because you really just, sometimes you don't even need to go through that to learn something else.
Exactly.
So, but I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
No, but for me, technology is very resourceful. I mean, to be honest, that's kind of our, platform. That's what we've been using for him, but that was his choice.
Oh, interesting.
That he would grab my phone and watch YouTube videos about trucks, and he knows the name of more trucks than I do. I literally learned from him. A backhoe, excavator, a front loader. He would, what's the front look like? But he learned by watching videos going on. Technology is huge. Please don't take it away. For me, there is a very good resource of learning for us.
Absolutely. And I love that you're giving him the space to be a teacher too, because we get caught up in being their teacher. As you said, don't assume that you have all the answers,
Right.
And I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because I talk to a lot of, eventual moms, women who just finished college, or, women who are at a point in their career where they're ready to have a child. And this is a lot of what we talk about, this idea of really wanting to do it differently. And it's not a matter of judging our parents or anything like that. It's just realizing that in a lot of instances where we are now, we have a responsibility to not perpetuate that, because we know the consequence of being groomed in that sense, and of not having the freedom to understand how to make decisions for yourself and to trust yourself and to feel trusted and trustworthy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So a lot of us want to make sure that we don't participate in that oppressive relationship with children, but then we don't really have any practice. We always think that there needs to be a leader. We need to find our savior and work towards that. And it's like, no, you are your savior.
Right. You're in charge.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. And then, so what does that mean? Once you come to terms with that, once you hit your head against the wall of prioritizing other enough times to come to terms with yourself, then the work becomes, all right, what does the language and practice look like? As you said, there's no nice way to say this, but shit, I've been groomed to believe that I'm supposed to find a nice way to say it. So now what does that practice look like,
Right. Yes. And I want to come out of that shell, but respectively. I don't know. That's another thing that was taught to me. Respect adults. Adults are right all the time. It doesn't matter the adult. But I am not going to be relaying that to my son, because sometimes adults are wrong and disrespectful. I'm not going to, teach him that, respect people even though they disrespect you. No. That was really insane for me. I would still just respect an adult even though they were wrong.
Yeah.
And, it was just hard to break away, because I thought I was just being rude or would be reprimanded so I'm still finding my way out of that.
Exactly. That's what I was saying. At any age, the irony and the tragedy more so is that doesn't go away when you become an adult. It's not like when you hit 18 or 21 or when you have your baby or whatever. It's not like you automatically are like, oh, and now I trust myself because I am officially adulting. Nah,
right.
You still deal with the same like, oh, my mama gonna be like, which is like, come on. Good and well now, adult to adult, that your mother actually is, in a sense, like she sees now how she's learning from you.
Right.
I talk to a lot of women who are in that relationship with their mother now. And I say openly that I was in a very volatile relationship with my mother for a very long time. My teenage years growing up with my mom, they were not pretty, because of the same thing you said, where it was like she was on something and I was on something else. And then she came up and I was like, yo, I don't care who you are. That's fucked up. I'm going to not take that from nobody. And we, those sort of things have happened. And so now being a mother and having a Marley, who's just like, excuse, no, that don't work for me, mom. And you're bossy and back up, son. And for me to be able to say, you know what, I get where she's coming from. Also, make sure that it comes in this context, because I'm still your Black Jamaican mother. So,
you be careful now.
Yeah, you be careful now here. Right?
Tread lightly.
And she's on the same thing though. She's on the same thing. So,
but you don't want to dimmer that at all.
Exactly.
She's gonna need that.
We need to get t-shirts made with that on there, Moya. Like real talk, because that's my thing too. And Chris helps me with that, because when I get all in my ego, he's like, remember. And he says all the time, like, it's so funny, like, we never dated in high school, but he said that he always knew that how I am, like, my personality type is who he would want to have children with, because it would be a woman who would, make sure that her children didn't, like, take any shit from anybody, even her or their dad or whatever. And I always felt so honored by that, because I'm like, fuck yeah. And that's what I get to experience with Marley and Sage, because they are, I say all the time, they own themselves. And I make sure, and Chris makes sure, that they have the space to do that. And that takes a lot of work for all four of us.
Yeah, yes. And I get where you're coming from, saying that Chris would help you or remind you, like, hey, come on. That's Brian. He is just this totally zen person. I'm sure Jordan is so lucky, because he would be like, babe, just relax. Remember, if you yell or you come at him, you might break that line of communication. But me, I'm very strong and quite the opposite of him. So he's kind of like I don't know how to even word it. He just calms me down. It brings me back to the ground.
Yes.
So that I can communicate with Jordan in that way. And sometimes I'll like listen to how he talks to him and like, okay, yeah, that's good.
All the time.
And I'm like, why can't I be like that?
Nah, and the thing is that, you know what? That's also a part of the work. You totally don't need to be like that. Like, you're having your own journey, and that is beneficial to Jordan and to you in other ways too, because remember, we're always our own worst critic. Like, how you see yourself, even how you see yourself through Jordan's eyes is not the same. Like, he's having a different experience.
I know.
Know what I'm saying?
Trust me. I know.
Yeah.
Even my boss actually said, we go through the meeting. She's trying to get me to be a supervisor, but no, because I would have to work on Saturdays now. So she's like, she said to me one day, she's like, you say sorry so much. Why? And I'm like, she's like, what are you apologizing for? I really don't know. I didn't know how to really answer her. She's like, it seems like you grew up with people that just didn't let you be or say certain things. She said, don't tell me sorry ever again.
Yep.
Do what you gotta do. And, I love you. I trust you. And I like that she just pointed out some stuff to me.
Yeah.
Trust me. And I didn't even really notice.
And
that,
so you don't remember you and I having that conversation when we were talking a lot when Chris, the girls, and I were in, where was that? Rivera Beach in Florida. Remember?
Yes, yeah.
And I was like, and I'm like, Moya, why do you keep apologizing for your feelings? Like, you'll tell me how you feel and you apologize before you have the feeling? And then
because I'm not allowed to. I wasn't allowed to have those feelings.
Yeah.
If I have that feeling, I better change it or else. So I'm still trying to like pull back from that. And I do not want to share that with Jordan even for 5 seconds. So,
exactly. But the awareness is going to help you, to make sure that you don't. Because the fact that you're aware of it and you're also aware of the consequence of it, right? And so this is how you're deschooling yourself. It comes right back to that. You're making sure that that thing that you learned, because by school, we don't just mean the physical building. We mean the mindset, that mindset of being taught something and believing that to be the only truth, the light and the way, like Jesus.
Yes.
And then to come to your own light and way and say, actually, no, thank you. Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah. So I think that realization, that hitting that wall is what helps for sure Chris and me to not perpetuate that onto Marley and Sage, to give them permission to say, we've been saying to them from they were babies, like literally from they were babies. And then when they became toddlers and also were more vocal, we said it to them all the time. Look, even if I make you uncomfortable, if you're not okay with how you feel as a result of something I say or do, it is your responsibility to communicate that to me. Do you understand me? Okay. Yes. What do I mean by that? Like we were doing that.
Very good. That's what I do to him all the time. I tell him, doesn't matter what it is, because sometimes mommy is wrong. She doesn't have all the answers. We can learn together.
Yes. Yes.
Which, that's where we're at. We learn together.
Yeah. And how powerful is that? That's the same thing that, her name is Tia Cunningham, who's another, we recorded another episode together. She said the same thing. She has 2 boys and, I think they are 9 and maybe 12. And she said they learn together so much because she makes sure that when they bring something to her, that she really tries to be as open-minded as possible. And she's like, it's not hard because they teach me shit all the time, you know, and they're at the age where, they're interested in specific things. So she helps them to create, just more learning opportunities, more ways to immerse themselves in the stuff. So they do research projects. And they always come to her as they're researching and saying, oh, Mom, you want me to give you or email you what I found? And she's like, nah, we're going to learn it together. When you do the presentation, I'm going to be learning. You're going to be teaching me. And then we're going to follow up on stuff together. And she's like, I feel like I'm a richer person as a result of this experience. Yeah.
I get where she's coming from, of course. You feel empowered even. Like,
yes.
I love learning with him.
Yes, same here. It's the same thing with the girls. And it's interesting too, because it helps me to see how learning isn't this one specific thing. Like we have an idea of what learning looks like. Learning looks like you're sitting with a book usually, right? A book is a very clear indication of some learningness.
Yes, exactly. So you just have to pay attention to how they communicate too. It's different ways. Like you said, Marley's will tell you, sometimes Sage won't, but she'll show you in another way, I'm sure. You just have to be aware.
Yeah, and that's the work. And because we tend again to try to put something in front of it and be like, well, my kid isn't talking yet. You know, shouldn't he be talking by now? And it's like, is he communicating in other ways? Could it just be that?
Funny.
Yeah.
That's funny. My goddaughter, she's maybe about a month older than Jordan. So like a few months. Jordan was talking before her, walking, you know, and my friend would ask, what's wrong with her? Why doesn't she speak? But when I watch her, this girl, I mean, she is perfectly fine. She just doesn't want to talk to you. She just doesn't want to talk. But she knows everything that Jordan knows. And she'll say, you know, she talks to Jordan more than she talks to her own parents. I'm not kidding. And I'll come over and I'll listen outside of the room because I don't want to hover over them. Yeah. And I'm in awe of her, like how she's talking to Jordan. But her mom is saying, no, she doesn't talk at all. I'm like, are you sure you're giving her that space to talk, or just try to understand where she's coming from? Maybe she just doesn't want to talk at the time, but she does communicate.
And that spills over into any relationship, right? Because I could say the same thing for even with Chris and me. Just like you said with Brian, you know, Chris is very much like the ocean. We say all the time, and like the girls are the same, like Sage is like Chris, they're like oceans, and then Marley and I are like fires or the sun. Yeah. And so it's like, that's why those personalities, so Marley and Sage get along really well. I mean, they are sisters who are like less than 2 years apart, and they get along beautifully. You know, of course they have their normal little things here and there. Anybody who lives in a house together is going to have, but they hold each other down, and they're like very much into very similar things, even though they're very different. Their personality types are different, and so they work well together. And it's the same thing with Chris and me. Like I always say, he's my base, like my charging station. And he says the same thing, but it's a different kind of charge. Like my charge is like a rejuvenation charge. That's what he gives me. But what I give him is more like a booster charge, you know, but we both need both of those charges.
Right. Brian says the same thing. He's like, I love that you push and you go.
Yeah, totally. It's like we wrote an essay together called The Pusher and the Holder around that same thing. And it's like, good. It's a point. And the work is to know like when to back up and to let yourself be held, and then to also stand in your right to affirm your push, you know, at a time where you say, you know what, I don't know why you don't get it. So
the show notes page for this episode is akilasrichards.com/Moya, Moya.
With the education, he's been in daycare. He was in daycare for a few months back in August. We took him out and we put him back again. And now I want to take him out again because he just seems so bored. And when we're home and I do something with him every day, whenever he wants to do. And now, I mean, he's been there for a few weeks and it just seems like he's just bored or doesn't want to do it. And he's even, let me tell you, I don't know if, you've met Jordan, so you know he is very strong with his grammar. He can talk. He can tell you what he wants, what he doesn't want.
That's why I said he's one of these really articulate kids who are like, here's what's happening. You have to guess.
Right. Yeah. No guessing. But now he seems so pulled back and I'm concerned if I'm making the right decision. And he even speaks baby talk. It irks Brian, but he comes home and he has never ever done that since the day he skipped baby talk and just went to, hi, mommy.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. You know, this is such a common experience. And this is why I'm so grateful that you're sharing this. So many of us have had this experience. This is why we started panicking with Marley, as much as they were saying when she was in elementary school, oh, she's gifted and now she's doing this and that. We knew when she was coming home, she was even nervous about asking questions. Is this the right time to this? And I'm like, oh no,
what?
You know, she was like nervous about doing that sort of thing. And then she would say, they put me in Sagey's class. Like she's thinking it must be a class for a toddler because why aren't we doing anything? Because she was used to being at home where she could engage, where she could say, Mommy, I want to look up this, or Mommy, could you leave me alone because I'm doing this, or I want to bake today, or I want to pretend bake today, or, you know, I don't need you today at all, Mommy. I'm going to be upstairs in the blue room and you're going to be downstairs, right? Like they would stake their grounds, you know? And we gave them, we gave them that sort of space. They self-organize. And this is why I'm so excited about these alternatives to traditional schools like agile learning centers and sort of unschooling schools that are popping up all over the country now, where children they allow them to self-organize, and then they create activities based on what the children say they want. So they design the curriculum in a sense every week, and they have the right to deviate from it, and they create processes together that the children organize for if you want to change the schedule. You know, it's great because then they get to practice these real life skills of managing time and relationships as opposed to just being told what to do at every time every day.
And when to do it. So yes, right now I'm really focused. I'm watching him. I don't want him to lose that interest. I don't know if I could, you know, get him to come back. So now we're just concerned about that, the education in him. And his teacher was like, oh my God, he's the smartest kid in my class. You should put him in a 3-year-old class. You know, just for his teacher to be telling me this all the time, like, oh man, he's my assistant. Okay. He'll help me go through the letters with the kids. I'm like,
that's exactly what was happening. Is he in the right class? Exactly. And, like, and also, does he need the class? Like he needs the space to explore. No, like I wonder what else he can, if he's not in an environment where there's like, okay, either you're doing the letters or you're helping with the letters. What if he wants to move on again to the trucks? What if his time is better spent reading articles and watching videos about trucks and looking at the different cities that, you know, where's the most technologically advanced spaces with the trucks? You know, it's just so to give them the space to explore it, because that's where innovation comes in. That's where you could end up having a 10-year-old who creates an app that connects truck drivers to whatever the fuck and changes the course of history. That's how that happens, not by boxing them in, but by giving them space.
Or telling him this is not the right time to do this, because that's, you know. But yeah, he's very good with searching up those videos. He's, just like you said, that's what he wants to spend his time doing. And he learned from that. Not kidding. People always ask, what do you do? What do you do? Use my resources, use a book. Use the internet, YouTube, Google. I can go on and on and on, right? These, you know, it's not just about a book in a setting in a class with kids that don't know what he knows, or, you know, I don't know. But
and there's a whole world of resources to tap into, right? Because even when there's no technology, this is what I loved about the privilege that we had of, and really it's a privilege we worked our asses off to be able to get to where we could travel with the girls. You know, a lot of times we think we can't travel until we have a lot of money. And Chris and I proved for 6 years in a row, this is going to be 7, that's a lie. It's a myth, because of course it would be easier if we had a ton of money in the bank, if we had a couple $1 million in the bank. But one of the great benefits is that we realized that learning happens everywhere. There were times in Jamaica where light gone. And so obviously the internet is down. So nobody's Googling shit. So it means that we are out on the beach and the girls are playing with children who grew up in a fishing village, who can get on a boat and take them out in the water. And we have, you know, we were able to capture these experiences so they can watch the video forever and look at the pictures of going out onto the boat with other children who were like under 10 years old and coming back in. And like, that's learning a bunch of freaking things that you cannot freaking learn in a book or on a video.
Exactly. Right. Naming all the parts of a truck. I don't know. I'm telling you, he teaches me. A snowplow. Mind you, we live in Florida. There is no snow. My son can tell you about a snowplow, sing a song, you know, what the parts of it, what does this, and he'll ask me, and like, okay, let me grab a computer so I can be able to provide an accurate answer for him. But,
right. I open up my phone.
Crazy.
I'm about to talk to you in 2 minutes. Yeah.
Right. That's, You just give me a second here. All right.
Yeah, so these are the things that I'm very glad that we get to share these things. And thank you so much for sharing aspects of Jordan's life and your life and Brian's life with us, because more of us need to know that this is also the norm. We tend to go by this checklist of, your child doing this at this stage, especially when we're in our 20s, you know, because I definitely was there in my 20s too. So I love knowing that there are women like you, Moya, who you broke out of that box early and you knew that you didn't need to start off at that point. And then you also see the times where you do catch yourself feeling guilty or nervous or unsure, and being willing to address that too, because we don't talk about that enough. There's no having your shit together that says you know the answers all the time. A lot of this is self-exploration. A lot of this is deschooling. A lot of this is observation.
Yes.
A lot of this is designing something new because there is no model, because you got to create what makes sense for you and yours.
Yep, that's right.
So I'm glad that you're embracing that and being willing to be honest about where you are in the process, because I know self-discovery is a significant part of your journey right now. Walking in Moya, am I being Moya in every sense of the word?
You know what? That's a funny thing. I throw that question into almost everything I do now. Is this really what I want to do? Is this Moya? What? When people ask me what I do for fun, I literally had no idea how to answer that question a few months ago. What's that? You know, what do I really, really like to do? So the self-exploration is definitely important. I learned that I like to write and that I'm good at it. Even my boss would tell me, okay, yeah, do your notes. Okay, girl, you need to write a book. I'm like,
even before your boss, you knew that because you saw the connection, like how much you could really express yourself in that, using that medium, right?
Yes. Just didn't pay attention to it. Not enough. That's all it was. Now I can get to explore that.
Yeah. And what are some of the benefits of that? Like, so what that now that you have more of a connection to what you actually want, how does that benefit you right now?
You walk in confidence with yourself. It's less worry and more trusting that you have it. You got this. This is what you want to do. There's more confidence.
Yeah. And we all know the benefits of confidence.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, cause it's that whole like zero fucks. That's one of my favorite hashtags ever, because it, it really does mirror. And for me, it isn't saying when I use it, or even when I think of that, it isn't saying that I don't care what anyone thinks. All it's saying is that I'm really prioritizing my intuition and my own needs and the things that matter to me, my core values, which also include the rights and the needs of my children and my partner, and that sort of thing. All of that is included. It's not an either or. There's no like line in the sand sort of thing all the time. Yeah. So those are some of the things that for me, confidence is, it allows me to do that. Things don't feel like a fight because I know where I'm grounded. I know whether I'm in alignment with myself or not. I don't need to try to enforce anything on anybody else. So it allows me to give space for the people in my world to be themselves too. Cause I realize,
Yeah. That's very important. And
that's what I call confident autonomy. I write a lot about that too. Especially in the feminist space, because I think that's a very, cause all feminism is essentially about equity, equality and equity, despite the sex, despite the gender and that sort of thing. And it's also the same thing for me as an adult. I want to have equity in my household, despite the fact that I'm in the position of power as the adult.
Yes, I get that. Exactly. Yeah.
And so that's important. And that becomes increasingly important for me as my daughters get older. Marley's going to be 13 shortly. Sage is going to be 11 in a couple of days,
I'm so sorry.
No, I'm actually really excited, but it allows me to really start to look at my mothering relationship with them. Mothering needs to look different as they get older, essentially.
You know what it looks like now to not have that. So
exactly.
Come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
And then on the other end, I also now can have a lot of compassion for my mom for the sort of things that she was going through while mothering me. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. My mom was 19.
Don't beat her up.
Exactly.
Like I said at the beginning, she couldn't teach me something she did not know that was never presented to her.
Yes, exactly. Because I also look at the relationship between my mother and her mother.
Yeah. About that.
Yeah. So that allows
me to be compassionate.
So you cannot blame it.
Nah.
Yeah. So, but it's two sides, right? It's both sides of the coin. It's the being compassionate with her because I have the privilege of having the experience through her, right? And then realizing that, okay, she did the best that she could. And it also gives me the incentive and the lesson and the responsibility to bring it up a notch even with my girls, to give them even more space than my mother could afford to give me.
Right. And then, like you said, you're able to, Auntie Valerie can learn something from you.
Yeah.
Like by being a grandmother. Yep, yeah. That's where we're at with my mom. That makes sense. That makes sense. You know, so that's what she'll say. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, it does.
Yeah. And that's great to be able to have that experience too. And also to see my mom have that experience because she's so into the girls. I'm like, oh my God, well, whoa.
Look at you.
Yeah. It's so cute. I'm like, I'm thankful I could give you these babies.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, this was awesome, Moya. I appreciate you. I know that your willingness to share is really going to bless a lot of ears because, as I said, I know from having dialogue with so many women that we are so hungry for these types of really honest conversations about how motherhood, and for men, how fatherhood is shaping us. And also just some of the non-mainstream conversation. We're not trying to figure out how to have our kids get better grades or to present better. We're really looking at ways to support who they're becoming and to also grow ourselves and to be more at peace with who we are as well.
Yep. It has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for considering me. I'm definitely open to sharing experiences and to speaking to other women in my place, you know, love, like you said, I do earn for these conversations and being able to talk to other women on that. So yeah, I have Instagram, Facebook.
I'll put it on the show notes page, which is going to be akilasrichards.com/Moya, MOYA. So I will put your social media links in there, Moya.
Perfect. Thank you.
I hope you got something good and juicy from that. If you loved this episode, consider becoming a patron of mine by going to akilasrichards.com/Patreon.
Thanks for listening to Farrah the Free Child podcast.